The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
You're listening to the Alldus podcast, ServiceNow series. Our guest today is Patrick Wilson. Patrick is the Director of Engineering at ServiceNow. Patrick, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. So, lots to cover, but let's start with yourself, please, as we do with all of our guests. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of your background in technology and what your journey has been from where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way? What's led you to where you are today as the Director of Engineering for ServiceNow?
I feel like the Director of ServiceNow Engineering is very not quite right. There are a lot of us. Started with maybe like computing kind of late. I feel like there's this maybe mythos about like computer programming and stuff that everyone who gets into it when they're like 14 or 13 or something. And that wasn't the case for me. I was in college. I switched my major a lot in college from, like political science and then like some other types of engineering and physics and a bunch of stuff. I was kind of bouncing around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was a music major for a little while. And as a general ed requirement, actually for like a music degree that I wanted to do at UC San Diego, I ended up taking a computer science class, and I'd kind of like looked into like programming and read some programming books and like a little bit when I was in high school already. But I took this class and I immediately fell in love with it, decided maybe I shouldn't do a music major after all, maybe I should do a computer science major. So ended up switching. So I guess I got into programming when I was like 19 or so. From there, went through college, did some internships. The last internship I did when I was a senior was at a company I had never heard of called ServiceNow. And I wasn't quite sure what they did at the time. I heard a lot of acronyms like ITSM and things like that. This was back in 2014. And I didn't really know much about enterprise software or anything like that. But I was chatting with some people who were working at the company at one of those career fair booths, and I really liked the people that I was talking to. Even since then, I've always kind of had this career rule that like the number one thing that I look for joining a team, working on a product, joining a company is just whether or not I get on with the people, whether or not I am energized by the people who are there, whether or not I feel like I can learn from the people who are there. And in this case, I definitely did. So I ended up doing an internship, went back to school, finished up while I was working part-time at ServiceNow, kind of continuing my internship through the rest of college, graduated, started working at ServiceNow, and worked there for 10 years or so, from 2014 until I guess about 2022, working on a lot of different things as an engineer. So working on a lot of ServiceNow products like just the general UI, back when the ServiceNow UI team was like 10 people sitting in a conference room, which was a lot of fun. It's much larger than that now, but I worked on Service Portal for a long time, worked on UI Builder and a lot of the new like UX framework stuff in ServiceNow. Left to join a startup for a little while with, again, some people who I had worked with really closely at ServiceNow who are doing this new thing. Also kind of in the workflow automation space, left to do that for about a year and a half, had a lot of fun, again, as an engineer. And then ended up coming back to ServiceNow when I met a guy named Jared Latham, who has actually been on this podcast. I Googled his name a long time ago when he was running a company called Dotwalk. But met him. He was telling me a little bit about this really exciting new stuff that ServiceNow was working on and these kind of ambitions that he had in particular for, kind of introducing new tooling in like the developer space and doing something for all those ServiceNow developers who write code for a living, who are looking for a more maybe industry compliant, like standards based, like modern feeling way to build applications on the ServiceNow platform. And as someone who spent a lot of time in the ServiceNow space, and as someone who's been an engineer for my whole life and building software for my whole life, or my whole professional life, that really kind of energized me. I thought, well, that sounds really cool. Maybe I should go back to ServiceNow, work on that sort of stuff, rejoin the company, again, in engineering to help like work on some of these things. And then from there decided, I fell in love with the team, fell in love with the product, was kind of interested in like pushing into maybe more like the management role, helping lead a team of developers, in this case, a team of 35 developers, on sort of revamping the developer experience on the platform. And that's what I've been doing for the last year.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that background. I know when we were speaking a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about your full circle journey. And the big reason why we wanted to get you on today is because of the work that you and your team are doing now. This is very much an episode for the developers in the ServiceNow community. So you've given a little bit of insight as to what you and your team are doing now. And I know from what you've shared with me, there's some incredibly exciting things coming down the near-term pipeline. So let's just jump straight into that. Define the responsibilities of your role, your group, and maybe just give us some of the insights of the cool stuff you're building for us.
Yeah, totally. So my group, as I said, it's a group called Developer Enablement. It's about 35 engineers, been growing over the last few months, which is really awesome. But the Developer Enablement group is effectively sort of you could maybe call it like a pro code, like dev tools group. Usually when people hear dev tools, like a dev tooling group or engineering group within a company, typically the orientation is around building internal development tools to help that company build better software faster. It's very similar to what we do. I'd say that the big caveat for us is that all of the tooling that we build, we intend for our own app developers that are here internally in ServiceNow to leverage, but we also expect partners and customers to use the same tooling as well. It's kind of roughly maybe split into 4 pieces, kind of the 4 pillars of the group. The first is the scripting runtime group. So this is a team of compiler engineers and runtime engineers that maintain and evolve the scripting engine on the ServiceNow platform. So of course, all over the platform, you have these places, these little blocks of code, right? These little code windows on business rules and on script includes and all that kind of stuff. And you can write whatever code you want in there, whatever JavaScript you want in there, and it'll execute on the ServiceNow platform. And there's an engine that actually executes that JavaScript. And that engine is owned by this team, the JavaScript runtime team. Their big mission is, how do we modernize the scripting engine on the platform? Believe it or not, the scripting engine, you probably believe it, and anyone listening who's done scripting on a platform would have no trouble believing this, but it hasn't really changed too much for a lot of ServiceNow's history from 2004, 2005 up until just a few years ago, really. Like, scripting has mostly kind of looked the same, and it's this sort of ServiceNow flavor of JavaScript. There are a lot of ways that ServiceNow JavaScript doesn't behave quite the same way as JavaScript in any other runtime environment, like the browser or like a Node.js environment, for example. There are a lot of differences. Our goal on this team, and our goal for the last few years, has been, how do we shrink that gap? How do we make the scripting layer on the ServiceNow platform as close to fully compatible with the Node.js ecosystem as possible? That opens up a lot of interesting opportunities. It opens up the possibility of general JavaScript developers being able to very quickly onboard onto the ServiceNow platform and start being effective, start doing great work, building apps. It opens up the possibility of things like leveraging third-party open source libraries in code. There's this rich ecosystem of lots and lots of JavaScript that's been written by the open source community, mostly for the Node.js runtime, or that is mostly at least compatible with the Node.js runtime. With our kind of, historically, our scripting engine hasn't been able to support any of that. So, the more that we can bring our scripting engine in line with those kind of standards, the more our customers will be able to leverage all of that really great work that's already out there. So that's the primary focus of that team. And of course, make things better, make things faster, make things more memory efficient so that people can do more on our platform. And then from there, we have that scripting engine. We also have an SDK team. So that team is working on a new product that just recently came out called the ServiceNow SDK. And the SDK is a CLI-based tool, so a terminal-based tool that developers can use on their local machines in their command line environment, that allows them to define ServiceNow apps as source code. So historically, the way that you build a ServiceNow app is you log onto an instance, you do all your development on the instance through all the various UIs that we have. Sometimes it's a form, sometimes it's a builder or something like that, like a UI builder or a flow designer. You occasionally maybe track those changes through Git, more often track them through update sets, and you move those update sets around from environment to environment. That's what app development looks like on the platform. The big change that the SDK brings is it says, hey, you can define your entire application as source code instead in a local development environment like VS Code as an example. As a developer, I used VS Code all the time for building applications and stuff. And you can track that source code through Git. So Git-based source control, which is something that developers in the general ecosystem are really familiar with.
Yeah.
And that's what the SDK is all about. Really, kind of the theme there is introduce more maybe modern and standard development practices to the ServiceNow ecosystem, and all this stuff about like managing update sets and XMLs and deploying things onto instances. How much of that can we abstract away behind a tool that you can just invoke from your CLI? That's what the SDK is all about. And then the two more pillars are. Sorry,
keep going.
I love talking
this is
about
great,
stuff,
man.
I could go on and on.
Listen, I know we were talking about it be free-flowing and conversational based, which it very much is, but you're on a roll and you've got two more pillars to go. So let's cover them.
Okay, cool. So the third pillar is another new product. We've been shipping a lot of new products lately, and another really exciting new product that just came out a few weeks ago that the community, I think, has been really kind of energized and excited by is a product called the ServiceNow IDE. Now, what the IDE does is it takes all that great work that we've been doing with the SDK, and it says, you know, it's cool that you can do this in like a local development environment, right? Like on your own local machine, set up VS Code, set everything up how you want. How cool would it be if we kind of took that experience that a developer might have to manually set up on their laptop and put it onto a ServiceNow instance directly? And there's been a lot of really cool movement in this space across the industry of these cloud development environment products. GitHub Code Spaces is a really great example of, you know, here's a URL, go to this URL, you're up and running. You're developing in a modern environment, everything's already set up for you, but it's for developers. So it's, you know, code first, it's VS Code, et cetera. So we wanted a similar experience for our product. So that's what we did. We took VS Code, the Microsoft product for editing apps, and we put that onto a ServiceNow instance. We run the ServiceNow SDK under the hood, running builds and everything as you're writing your code. And you can do all of your ServiceNow app development, writing code in a way that feels comfortable and familiar to you as a developer. And you can do that right on the ServiceNow instance. So that's what the ServiceNow IDE is all about. It brings Git-based source control with it. It brings really tight integration with all the different ServiceNow UIs and builders that the company's invested a lot of money in that our customers love to use, the forms and lists, of course, and then tools like Flow Designer and Table Builder can all be inlined directly in this IDE right next to your source code. Just kind of streamline that sort of development experience. And just as kind of maybe a quick tangent here. So I spent a long time working on a product called Service Portal, and Service Portal, for those not familiar with it, it came out, I think, in 2016 or so. And the really cool thing about it, I think, was that you could build these portals, you could build widgets and things for your portals, and the whole development environment for it was inlined inside the portal editing experience. So if you saw a widget on a page you liked, and you said, oh, I want to tweak that, I want to make some changes to that, I want to build a new widget based on that one, right click it, edit widget in editor. It pulls up a little widget editor thing. You can click clone this widget. It creates your own widget based on that widget, and you're off to the races in your coding. But you're not, but the code that you're writing is like regular HTML, regular CSS, AngularJS, which back in 2016 felt like a very modern thing. It's not very modern anymore, but at that time it certainly was. And it was kind of this really cool blend of like super accessible and yet very powerful and familiar to developers. And I think a lot of people really resonated with it. That's the sort of, at least for me, something that I'd like to capture with the ServiceNow IDE as well, which is, all the power of a modern development environment, but super accessible, really easy to jump into. And that's kind of for me, that's sort of the goal of like where I'd like to take the IDE, is that combination of power and like accessibility that I feel like is going to resonate with people. So that's ServiceNow IDE. Fourth pillar, last pillar, of course, ServiceNow AI company. We one of the best applications, I think, one of the best modern applications of AI right now in any company is in development assistance and code assistance. So we're also working very hard on a code assist tool. You can think essentially kind of GitHub Copilot, but for ServiceNow, how much faster can people write code, and how much better can that code be if it's assisted by generative AI? So that's another major product that we're working on that we're really excited about. It's a big team, so we're working on a lot of stuff.
A lot in there, but I'm glad that you went into such detail on each of the four pillars, because any one of them could be a conversation in and of themselves, just given the development and the impact. So it's safe to say that the stuff being released from your group is going to have an incredible impact on the broader development community and will help accelerate more people coming into the ServiceNow ecosystem. When you look at the possibilities just for those four, obviously a lot of this is done in conjunction with your users, the big customers, and what they'd like to see. You and your team, when you're putting all these ideas together and you build it and you see what the possibilities are, what are some of the standout, features and capabilities that you're proud of, excited about, and speaking to an audience of your developer community? What can they expect once all of this is at go live?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think one of the when I think about ServiceNow and the advantages I think that ServiceNow has as a software platform, it's really in that no code, low code space, right? It's in all this investment in building really great low code and no code builders for, you hear talk about the citizen developer, right? Or, the no code user, the business analyst that wants to put together a quick app for their team to help them be more productive in like financial, like books management, or someone in HR who wants to put together an app to help with onboarding or something like that, right? Like that's this really powerful aspect of the ServiceNow platform, I think, that we're going to continue to see investment in. So coming into it from the pro code angle, and that is my team's focus is, you want to write code. You want to write code for the ServiceNow platform. How do we help you do that better? One of the things I'm most excited about with our product line is this really cool kind of marriage between those two worlds, the pro code world and the no code, low code world. One of the features that we built into the SDK is this kind of principle called bidirectional sync. And the idea is this. Currently, if you want to define a business rule or a flow or something like that, you would do it in the builder for that thing, right? You go to maybe a form, or you go to a builder, you define that thing and you save it. Now you've got a new form. We also have this other way now of defining entities on the ServiceNow platform with source code. Bidirectional sync is this idea that as I'm making modifications to the source code, for example, through the IDE, maybe I'm writing some code and I click the save button, the build button, that gets built. Now I can view it in the instance right there, kind of like a live preview thing, right? And then if I make modifications in the UI, I click the save button in the UI, we synchronize that back to the source code again. So the source code's being kept up to date. And I think what this kind of sets up and what our ambition is for it is to enable these kind of diverse teams of some professional developers, some kind of maybe low code developers, and then some maybe like business analysts or somebody else who's not too comfortable writing code or doing too much complex stuff. They just want something really fast. All of these people working together on the same set of applications, and everything is being synchronized together in such a way where we're giving the right ways to edit applications to this pro code group of users, and we're giving the right tools to this low code and no code group of users as well, in such a way where it all still blends together. I haven't seen any products in the enterprise software space that do something like this. And I think that it gets at a very real need in like kind of a modern organization where you have your software developers and they're building software, but they're not the only people building software. There's other folks building software as well. And the solution isn't to try and expect all of, like you're a business analyst to go and learn a bunch of JavaScript over the course of a month to be able to write some code. And I don't think the expectation should be that the pro developer has to use a no-code tool or a low-code tool if they don't want to. We should be giving everybody the tooling that they want to get their job done as effectively as they can with the tooling that feels familiar to them.
It democratizes it for people to do some of the fundamentals that previously they would have needed a full-on developer to do, or they would have been limited based on what the previous versions of the platform would allow. All of that's removed. So it allows for a lot of creativity for the pro code cohorts. And then for the people who just need, some basic modifications, it empowers them to take it on themselves with confidence.
That's right. And it all still blends together because it's all built on the same kind of platform principles of that Fluent source code. And that's the name of that language I was describing. It's called Fluent. It's a language that we developed. But that's kind of the big thing I'm really excited about with this new tooling that we're developing. I'd say that the second piece, and I kind of touched on this earlier on the scripting engine side, but there's this massive community of JavaScript developers in the tech world that are developing for thousands of different types of platforms. There are many, many ServiceNow developers as well, but in terms of order of magnitude, like the number of JavaScript developers blows it out of the water, right? So what I'm really excited about is, how great would it be if any JavaScript developer that has experience with any platform comes into the ServiceNow ecosystem and says, I already know how to develop in this platform. Like, it feels familiar to me. I don't have to learn a bunch of new stuff. I can hit the ground running. And then how do we see the ServiceNow app development community explode from there? That's one of the things I'm also very excited about.
So glad you touched on that, because that was definitely a point that I wanted us to cover today. Given the incredible growth of ServiceNow as a platform, but also with that growth, there are some challenges to maintaining, and one of the biggest challenges, the supply and demand of talented people who can come into the ecosystem and help these organizations implement new products and features on the ServiceNow platform. And this seems like a bit of a call to action to the JavaScript community who are thinking about what's next. This is it. It's a tremendous opportunity to segue in and really catch the wave as it's building. Going back to the AI capability side of thing, then look, you're an engineer and a developer yourself by heart. You're in ground zero of where scalable AI is being made possible for all companies at all industries.
Right.
Looking at what you and your team have developed now, and looking at the industrial scale leaning into AI with the ServiceNow customers, you're seeing what's possible. It's hard to predict what can change with the advancements of LLMs and Gen AI. So even if we look at the next 1 to 2 years, just within the ServiceNow AI crossover, what are you looking forward to? What do you anticipate? What are you hoping to see? And when we get you back on the show in a year or two from now, what will we be talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think it's a really exciting time to be in this industry. I'll say maybe my personal view is I think, like a lot of engineers, I think I'm very hype resistant. During the crypto boom, I think I was very hype resistant then. During the whole metaverse, like the industry has a tendency to get taken by movements of one sort or another, right? And a lot of them turn out to be nothing, but then some of them, I think you're like, well, there's really something here. And I think that this Gen AI movement is a more recent big push in the tech industry that I think has legs. And I think the reason for that is who said this? I think the CEO of Box said something a couple years ago, or maybe a year ago, that was to the effect of, even if there are no new developments in the fundamental underlying technology that's driving Gen AI, no new huge breakthroughs in LLMs the way that we've seen the last couple of years, even if that doesn't happen and what we have right now is what we're working with, that's still enough to drive years of innovation in our actual products. Because I think that that's something we haven't seen. Only a few companies, ServiceNow being one of them, are, I think, leading on how this really cool new technology actually integrates into product. Concretely, how does product change? How does the user experience, or developer experience in this case, meaningfully change for based on this new technology? I think one product that's not a ServiceNow product that has really reached maybe a product market fit is GitHub's Copilot product, which has kind of proven out that, as a assistive technology for writing code, these LLMs are really, really powerful. And I think that that's where ServiceNow's opportunity is. How can we develop more fine-tuned models, which is something that we're working on internally right now, actually, and we have been working on for the last few years. How can we fine-tune and pre-train these models, run them in our own data center so that customer data doesn't have to leave the ServiceNow data centers, which is very compelling for our customers? And how can we train these models to be hyper contextualized to your instance, to the code that you're writing in the context of your organization, in the context of your instance. So that really like hyper contextualized kind of a code assist tools is what we're working on right now. So part of it is about, bring that kind of co-pilot experience into my experience writing code on the platform. Yeah. And then part of it is how can we leverage what we already know about the applications that you're building, in addition to everything that we know about the data that's running on the instance, to feed further context into these LLMs to provide even better suggestions. So I think what my hope is that in a year or two, I think I'll be back here and I'll be talking about all the advances maybe that we've made in our code assist tool around, like, it's faster than ever. It's offering better suggestions that are really specific to your organization and really specific to developing on the ServiceNow platform in a way that the general purpose AI products can't match. That's sort of in a nutshell what we're working on.
Excellent. Final question from me, Patrick. Again, speaking to an audience of ServiceNow professionals, many of whom developers and engineers, where can they stay up to date with what's coming down the road? At what point can you guys share, here's what we're working on next? I know a lot of this stuff is early in development, but for people who have been intrigued by what's coming in the near term, how can they stay up to date on what else you guys have in store for them in the months and years ahead?
Yeah, great question. So we love talking to customers. I adore it. I try to talk to customers every day. So one way to get in contact with us is just to reach out to me directly. I love hearing from people, especially people who are interested in trying out some of these tools, or maybe have used some of these tools and have feedback. What's great? What would you like to see changed? What would, in your eyes, kind of take it to that next level? I love to hear about it. More generally, we actually just set up a presence on the community.servicenow.com site. If you go to the developers community, you'll see a new IDE, SDK, and Fluent forum that developers can come and ask questions, get help with things. My team is monitoring that forum to help support anybody who is adopting these tools. In the same place, we also have an articles page where we'll be posting articles over time. I've already posted a couple. My team will be posting more about some of the great features that we have available, how to get the most use out of them, and a little bit about maybe what's coming down the pipeline too.
Excellent. Patrick, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you coming on and doing this. I know we've been speaking about this for a while now, so I'm delighted we finally got you on, and it didn't disappoint. Lots of incredible stuff that we've covered.
Totally.
So listen, best of luck with the remaining launches. Let's keep in touch, and we'll get you back on the show again in 2025 to talk about all the fun stuff you've built since then.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, JP.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.